Hey everyone, Brendan Sander here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to AC/DC's High Voltage and T.N.T turned 50 this year. I can't believe that it's been that long already for these two amazing albums that really kicked off a lot, not only for the band, but also hard rock music in general. AC/DC generally considered to be one of the most defining bands in all of rock, certainly still inspiring great rock artists today. But their first two albums, their first two studio albums, High Voltage and T.N.T, were both released in 1975. Ultimately, we would end up with an international edition, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to get to this sort of thing. But 2025, the 50th anniversary of these great albums and the band. So join me as I celebrate not only these albums, but AC/DC and the international version itself of High Voltage. Hey, so how's that? I did a little wardrobe change for you guys because I've got three killer AC/DC High Voltage shirts, and I thought, hey man, which one am I going to wear for this video? I'll just wear them all for you guys. But by the way, if you do like them, you can go over to SocieTees.com, online t-shirt company where I get these shirts from. They're really, really cool. They're super duper soft, made with American Apparel t-shirts. If you know that company, you know how soft that stuff is. I can't stand some of those really rough, hard concert shirts that we get these days, or even back in the day. Their stuff is great. But if you like any of these, definitely head over to SocieTees.com for that. I think you're going to really, really enjoy their product. But let's just back up a bit here with the history of AC/DC, because they're actually founded in 73. It takes them a while to get to where they're going with things. But there's always been a big question about where did the name come from, and I'm going to clear it up right here. It was the band itself, the name, comes from Angus Young, Malcolm Young, seeing on their sister sewing machine the AC adapter, which said AC/DC, but had all periods between it. They put the slash, the lightning bolt. Ultimately, that's where they get AC/DC from. And by the way, the sister also used to make all the early costumes for Angus. So I kind of like that whole little tie-in there. And of course, George Young, older brother from the Easy Beats, would be a producer for them. So a lot of cool family history within the whole AC/DC thing, which is kind of cool. But by 74, the band is in the studio recording stuff. As I mentioned, George Young, Harry Vanda. They record High Voltage, the 1975 version, which we're going to get into breakdown in just a minute. Later with the 75 album of T.N.T, which would really kind of define who the band is going forward. Ultimately, finally, getting signed to Atlantic Records in 76, which leads us to this definitive version of it where they would sell 3 million copies just in the US alone. As they say, the rest is history. The band has since sold over 200 million albums. They've been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Who needs that? The band itself defines rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. But let's go in, let's break this down. So High Voltage 1975, obviously Bon Scott, singer on this one here, debut studio album, only released in Australia and New Zealand. Don't know why it was so limited, but that is where it initially was released. It wasn't until the international version a year later in 76 that more places got a hold of it. But we end up with a different version on this one here, and it's kind of interesting how we arrive at that. So the 75 version, 39 minutes, 8 tracks, Baby Please Don't Go, She's Got Balls, Little Lover, Stick Around, Soul Stripper, Ain't Got a Hold on Me, Love Song, and Show Business. And the album itself, if you've ever heard the whole length of the original album itself or pieced it together, it's got more of a glam rock sound to it. It really didn't sound like what we know AC/DC as today until they got to T.N.T, the follow-up album. And so that album itself has a runtime of 42 minutes, 9 tracks that are on that album, and really, really got the definitive sound of the band. This is where the band, sort of figured out who they are. They've stuck with it ever since, and thank goodness, because in my opinion, nobody does this sort of rhythm and blues based rock, kind of really one of the first real hard rock bands out there. And nobody does it quite like they do. And it's just really amazing, in my opinion, that for 50 years, AC/DC has sounded like AC/DC. There's been a lot of different changes in styles, but you know what? You can always count on AC/DC sounding like AC/DC. And really, what is that? Because so many bands have tried to sound like AC/DC, but I don't think they've ever really quite gotten there. I don't know, when I hear these other bands that play that same 3-chord rhythm and blues, hard rock, and they've got the gravelly vocal in it, just makes me want to pull out my AC/DC even more. But let's back up to how did we get to the international version of this? This is the definitive debut album from the band, but it's really made up of those first 2 releases. So you've got 2 tracks pulled from the actual first 1975 High Voltage, Little Lover and She's Got Balls. But 7 of the tracks are taken from the T.N.T. release. It's A Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll Singer, The Jack, the Live Wire, T.N.T. I mean, those songs right there are absolutely career-defining songs. Can I Sit Next to You? And then the title track itself, High Voltage, which was not on the first album, made it to the second album, but now that is appearing here on this one. So all those killer tracks made up on this. It's really more of a compilation album of their first 2. So you kind of pull the best from it and made this. No wonder this album did as well as it did. But here's the thing. So I was always kind of fascinated by this. 4 of the songs from the debut album of High Voltage in 1975 would later turn up on 74 Jailbreak. And this didn't come out until 84. But 4 of the songs from that album, You Ain't Got a Hold on Me, Show Business, Soul Stripper, and Baby Please Don't Go, that didn't make the international version, appear over here on this. And Baby Please Don't Go was actually a very successful early single for the band, and it's what led them to recording the debut album. That was a successful song, so kind of cool how that all works out. Now, the remaining songs that didn't make this album here or this album here, so where did all of that stuff end up? Stick Around would later turn up on Backtracks in 2009, along with Love Song and Rocker. Those are all from Backtracks, which was the box set that the band had. School Days, which was a cover of the Chuck Berry song itself, would turn up on Bonfire in 1997. And I kind of really don't know, and maybe we'll get it this year. Who knows? We still have time in the year. But a definitive version of High Voltage that would have the original High Voltage, T.N.T., the international edition, and I'm sure there's some cool outtakes, live album, who knows what else we might get in there, all in one box. It would be super cool if they would do that. Maybe somebody watching this video could prompt that to happen. It would be really, really nice. I know I'm just speculating, having fun with it. All right, so let's bring it all the way back around to the international edition of High Voltage. This thing here is where it's at, obviously. It's a compilation of the 2 albums, T.N.T. and the original High Voltage, 2 1975 era albums recorded, maybe late 74 into 75. So all the material, though, that is on this and what was originally released out there is 1975. So despite the date on the international one saying 1976, it, in fact, is a 1975 era album. Therefore, the band, this album, and the other 2 we've been talking about, 1975, 50th anniversary for these. So really, really amazing, though, that the band is still out there doing their thing. And no, we don't have the original members. You know, we still got Angus out there just absolutely kicking things up and legitimately, right, the way he does his guitar solos and everything. But, you know, Malcolm Young, his playing with Angus Young, his soloing that's on here, Bon Scott's vocal style on here, nothing really out there at that time when this was going on. These guys set the bar and they've kept it high ever since. In my opinion, AC/DC has never made a bad album. There might be some we don't like as much as others, but we know what we're getting with AC/DC. They've always delivered, but that blueprint was set here. And this is the album from which everything sprung. 5 of these songs still played in concert today. It's A Long Way to the Top If I Want to Rock and Roll, The Jack, Live Wire, T.N.T., the title track, High Voltage alone, right? So many great tracks on this thing. And the way that these songs were brought across, whether through the production, the performance, the overdubs that were done on this thing that just embellish it and make it more than it is. This is an album 50 years old, and it sounds as fresh today, in my opinion, as it did when I first heard it, which, yeah, is back in the 80s for me. Some of you guys, I'm sure, heard it first time go around. Congrats to you guys for being there and still being here today to enjoy a cool video like this where we're celebrating such an amazing album, a defining career album. I love it when bands kick off and start off, even if it's this one, technically a combo of their very first two albums, but define that sound and stick with that. AC/DC's done it beautifully and continued it. I love the band. I'm glad to be here today to be able to celebrate with you guys the killer album, High Voltage, International Edition, but 50 years old. And congrats to the band who's also out there celebrating 50 years. All right, everyone, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts about this killer album, High Voltage. Don't forget, if you liked any of the shirts that I wore, I switched out to this one just before. So this cool green one here, it's got concert dates on the back. You saw the other two that I had. Head over to SocieTees.com, the online t-shirt shop, and you can actually type in and search by band. So you can just search AC/DC and see all these great shirts. They got a lot of their cool bands over there, so don't be shy. Definitely check out everything else they got. But a lot of you guys are always asking me where I get my shirts. SocieTees, that's where I get them. But as I said, we were here today for AC/DC. Let's hope we're here more and more and more, and we can continue to be here for AC/DC. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.